It's good to see you all this morning. It's an honor and privilege for me to be here. My name is Danny, and I currently serve as the student lead pastor at BT here in McAllen. And I get the opportunity to bring the word for you guys this morning. And so I'm just praying that God would do something amazingly awesome in all of our lives this morning. And I'm so excited to be here. I kind of have a background with FBE. It was about my junior year of high school that I got invited to come to the student ministry here at FBE. And I really didn't know much about church. My family didn't raise me up in church or anything like that. And so I had been to a youth group like once before when I was in junior high. And so I didn't know much about anything about church, anything about God, anything about Jesus, or none of that stuff. And so kind of the story there, I remember coming to FBE for the first time and being a part of the student ministry on a Wednesday night. And I think it should be still the same way. But I remember walking through the door and going up the stairs to get to the youth room, right? And I remember as soon as I opened the doors, it was just really loud. There was like music playing, and I can kind of hear like these footsteps and people running around. And as I got to the top of the stairs, this is the way my memory recalls, I see this giant man chasing middle school kids with water noodles trying to beat them down, right? And you guys probably already know exactly who I'm talking about, right? And so as soon as I get to that moment, and as soon as I get to the top of the stairs, I don't know what's going on. This guy kind of stops what he's doing because he recognizes that I'm different, recognizes that I'm new, and he puts the water noodles down, and he extends his hand and says, "Hey, how's it going? My name is Nick." And that's how I met Nick Acker, right? And so Nick Acker was in my youth pastor for several years, and Nick really poured into my life and really showed me the gospel and showed me Jesus. And it was a couple of months later that I gave my life to Jesus, and I actually got baptized here at FBE. And it was actually in the fellowship hall because this room that we're in was being renovated. That was about 11 years ago or so now. And so I really love FBE. I love this place. I'm excited to be here this morning. And I'm continually praying for you guys as y'all are now walking through this journey. So if you have your Bibles, open up to the book of Jonah. We're going to be in the book of Jonah this morning. We're going to read a story and see what it has for us. Today's sermon title is Don't Hesitate. And so this is something I love doing with my students. I get to teach high school students every Wednesday night. Something I love is I love to kind of get them to interact with each other. So I'm going to do something a little weird for you guys, and hopefully you think it's cool. If not, you don't have to participate, and I won't have any feelings hurt. But today's sermon title is Don't Hesitate. So what I want you to do is look at the person next to you and say, "Don't hesitate." There you go. Simple as that. We're good. Everybody's ready to go now. Just kidding. So, the past couple of years, I've had a really amazing opportunity to be a part of some great work going on in New York City. So my wife and I, her name is Summer. She's sitting in the back. Everyone can say hi to her later. She is awesome. And so, but my wife and I, and really with BT, we've been having this amazing opportunity to be a part of some amazing work going on in New York City. So in New York City, you have like these different boroughs that exist to kind of make up the entirety of New York City. And there's one of the specific boroughs is Queens. And I met a buddy of mine about 4 or 5 years ago when I was in my previous church. And he basically took his family. They were living in the Houston area. Took his family, moved to the borough of Queens, New York City, and planted a church there. And as soon as I heard this guy's story, I knew that I wanted to be a part of this. And so for the past couple of years, I've been able to take students and adults to mission trips to New York City and to Queens. And so I'm going to be sharing a couple of those stories as we kind of go throughout the sermon. But today's sermon is Don't Hesitate. And so this past summer, as we were in New York and we're doing some work there and things like that, I got a text from one of the pastors, and he said, "Hey, can you meet me for coffee early in the morning tomorrow? I want to talk to you about some things before we kind of go about our day." And I was like, "Yeah, for sure." So we go to this little coffee shop, and we're hanging out, we're talking. And I see this guy walk into the coffee shop, and he's wearing this T-shirt that is a Christian rap artist. And yes, those exist, and I know it sounds kind of weird, but he's wearing this T-shirt of a Christian rap artist. And if you know anything about this specific neighborhood, so in Queens, there's a neighborhood inside of Queens called Astoria. Astoria is about a tenth of the size of McAllen, so I'm sure you guys kind of driven around McAllen before. Astoria is a really small kind of geographic area, but there's about 150,000 more people than the population of McAllen. So it's really densely populated in a really small area. And really the reason that they planted this church in Astoria is because they found out that this neighborhood is one of the most diverse neighborhoods in the entire world. They said there's about 120 nations represented in this one neighborhood. That means so many beliefs, so many religions, so many backgrounds and nationalities and those sort of things. So their mindset was, I'm going to go plant a church there, and it's really one of the least populated churches area for churches in this area. There's only 5 Bible-believing churches in that area for about 250,000 people. So they're like, hey, let's go plant a church there, right? Makes sense. So that's why I wanted to go and help them in their mission, their efforts. So all that to say, the Christian population in Astoria is like very, very minimal. So whenever we saw this guy walk into the coffee shop, we're like, surely this guy's a Christian, right? He has a Christian t-shirt on, right? Makes sense, right? And so we're like, let's talk to this guy. I want to talk to him, maybe hear a story and see if he's a part of a church or something. But if you know anything about New Yorkers, they're busy. They got to go. So he went in, grabbed his coffee, and left, right? But I felt the feeling of wanting to talk to him in that moment, but I hesitated, right? And because I was like, nah, he's busy, right? Everyone's busy. Everyone's got their schedules, and I don't want to interrupt his life or interrupt his schedule. And so I hesitated going up to talk to him. And so I didn't really think much about it. We kept talking. We had our meeting, and we went about our day, right? So later on that day, it's now like 5 o'clock in the afternoon. That was like at 7 in the morning. So later on that day, we're going about our day. We're riding the subways in New York. And if you know anything, like all the subways are just jam-packed with people, and every kind of train has about 5 or 6 carts, right? And so I board on one of the carts with my team, and all of a sudden I see the same dude sitting on a chair in the subway, and I was just like, that's impossible. Like, there's no way that can happen, right? And he was wearing the same shirt and everything. And so I knew that God was wanting me to talk to him, right? And I didn't talk to him. No, I'm just kidding. I did that time. And so God was like, I'm putting him in front of you again, so you better talk to him this time, right? And so I was like, all right, I'll talk to him. And so I asked him about his shirt, and we started talking about stuff. And sure enough, he was from the West Coast, and he had just moved to Astoria because he got a job in Manhattan, and he had been looking for a church to be a part of. And I was like, hey, well, I'm here with Connection Church here in Astoria. They're a great church. And that Sunday, he shows up to service, and I was like, man, God, you are super awesome, right? And it was amazing because that conversation probably could have happened at 7 a.m., but because I hesitated, God was gracious enough to allow the conversation to still happen at 5 p.m. And so all that to say is this. I believe whenever we hesitate to do the things that God's calling us to do, we may miss a moment from God. And I'm afraid to miss a moment for God. And so this entire message today is don't hesitate. And so there's a guy in the Bible who I believe hesitated, but yet still got to experience a moment from God, and his name is Jonah. And so I want to read his story. We're going to kind of read and talk, and so kind of stay with me. We're going to start in chapter 1 and verse 1. It says this. Now the word of the Lord came to Jonah, the son of Amittai, saying, Arise, go to Nineveh, that great city, and call out against it, for their evil has come before me. But Jonah rose to flee to Tarshish from the presence of the Lord. He went down to Joppa and found a ship going to Tarshish. So he paid the fare, went down to it to go with them to Tarshish, away from the presence of the Lord. Let's kind of pause right there. So I feel like I can relate to Jonah, right? Because we get the mission that God called him to do, right? He said, Jonah, here's what I want you to do. I want you to go to Nineveh, and I want you to go to this city, and there's a bunch of evil there, and I want you to call out against the city, right? But what we saw right away from Jonah is he hesitated, right? And he's like, I'm not going there. I'm going to go this way instead, actually, right? He kind of backs up, and he kind of runs away from the presence of the Lord, right? And so I feel like I can relate to Jonah in that way, that he hesitated just like I hesitated. And maybe for so many of us, if we're honest with ourselves, we often hesitate too in doing the work that God is calling us to do, right? And so I can kind of understand Jonah. I think a lot of people maybe give Jonah a bad rap because he didn't do what God wanted him to do, and we're like, I'll do anything God wants me to do, right? And maybe we kind of like make fun of Jonah, or we kind of think bad of Jonah, but try to wrap your mind around what God wanted him to do, right? And I feel for Jonah in this moment. So God is telling Jonah, go to Nineveh because their city is super evil. There's a bunch of terrible stuff going on there. I want you to call out against their evil, right? So imagine if God called you, adults, who, whatever your workplace is, or students, maybe God's called you to your school, and maybe God told you, I want you to go to your school, and I want you to stand on top of the cafeteria tables and tell everybody how evil they are, right? All those students that are partying on Friday nights, tell them how evil they are, right? I guarantee everyone's just going to get all their food and start throwing it at you, right? No one wants to be that guy to go tell everybody how evil it is. So I can kind of feel for Jonah why maybe he didn't want to do this, because he was given a really difficult mission to go after something that's not easy to do. And he was called to go to this city to go call out against their evil. And so obviously Jonah, he was called to a place that maybe he didn't really want to go to. right? And I kind of feel for that. So like I mentioned earlier, I'm a student pastor, and so I've been able to work with students for about 6 years now. I've been at BT for almost 3 years. And now specifically at BT, my role is specifically over high school students. So my job is I get to hang out with high school students like every day of the week, and it's amazing. I love it. And so I kind of feel for Jonah because he says this, that he didn't want to go to a place that God was calling him to go, right? And I know this by just looking at the culture of the students here in the Valley, that so many of our students in this area, and maybe even adults, that so many of us have the kind of Valley mindset of, I cannot wait to get out of here. Right? I can't wait to graduate high school and move to San Antonio, move to Austin, move to Dallas, and go do all that stuff. And hear me, that's not bad stuff, right? That's not a bad dream or a bad desire to have. But I think that the danger of that is we just kind of coast through this time in our high school life and just wait to get out of here, wait for that next big thing. And the issue with that is this, is that in that moment of wanting to get out of here, we don't allow God to use us where we currently are. And I know that for a fact, one, because I get to hang out with students and I get to see them living in their culture, and two, because that was me when I grew up here in this area. Right? I graduated from Edinburg North High School, and all through high school, my mindset was, I can't wait to get out of here. I can't wait to move north, right? God, send me somewhere north. I'll go wherever you want me to go, as long as it's north, right? Anywhere north of Alfredo, I'm good, right? Get me out of here, right? And so God did that. God moved me to a little bit north, about 2 hours north of here. It wasn't super far, but I was like, that's a good start. I'll take it, right? Moved me to Camp Zephyr. I got to live there for a couple of years, right? I worked with this guy. It was beautiful. It was amazing. I also worked with this girl that was there, and she became my wife, so that was awesome, right? So that was good. Thank you, Lord, moving me 2 hours north, right? And so I moved there, and I was like, all right, this is good. I'll take this for now. And I just kind of felt that was like a first step to moving further and further north. So I was like, God, you called me here, and next thing I know, you're going to call me to San Antonio, you're going to call me to Austin, you're going to call me to Dallas, you're going to call me north, right? And after a couple of years of being in that area, I got to work with a church in that area. I got to help out the student ministry and be a student pastor there. A couple of years later, God said, hey, I want you to actually go back to where you came from. And I was just like, God, I don't know if you heard my prayers or not. I'm trying to go that way, not this way, right? And God said, hey, I want you to go to a place that maybe you don't really want to go to. And I want you to go to McAllen. I want you to serve the students at this church there. And for so long, as I really felt that calling, I hesitated. For so long, it terrified me to move back to this area. And that's why I feel for Jonah, because I feel like Jonah was terrified to go to the city that God was calling him to go to. And I felt terrified to come to the city that God was calling me to come to, but yet that's where God wanted me to be. And so I hesitated for so long, and finally I said, all right, I'll go there. And now I get the amazing opportunity to minister to students who have the same story that I have, who have a desire maybe to go do something. And like I said, I think that's all well and great. Go to school somewhere else, right? Get out of the valley if you need to. But don't waste the time that God has given you here to do something amazing for him. And I feel like that's really the main message that God is wanting us to have here with the story. So Jonah runs away. He wants nothing to do with this evil city. And look what happens next. Let's go to verse 4. So the Lord hurled a great wind upon the sea, and there was a mighty tempest on the sea, so that the ship threatened to break up. Then the mariners were afraid, and each cried out to his God, and they hurled the cargo that was in the ship into the sea to lighten it for them. But Jonah had gone down into the inner part of the ship and had laid down and was fast asleep. So here's the thing. God was calling Jonah to go to a specific place, to a specific city, to go do a specific work, right? And Jonah's like, I don't want to do that. So Jonah runs away, he pays his fare, jumps on the ship, is like, I'm going the opposite direction, right? And while he's on there, God causes this storm to take place, right? And while Jonah's on this ship, he's like, I don't care about the storm, I'm just going to go to sleep, right? I'm going to pretend like nothing's going on, right? So often we kind of pretend like there's no problems around us, right? We just try to go to sleep. And so what happens is, as Jonah's doing that, the people on the ship are just terrified for their lives. And that kind of tells me that this storm that God caused is a pretty serious storm. Because these guys are mariners, right? They're people of the sea. They're always on the water. They're not afraid of the water. But yet, because of this great storm, and they're terrified for their lives, that tells me that this storm is amazingly great, and that they're afraid for their lives and trying to figure out what's going on. And then they figure out that it's because of Jonah that the storm is taking place. And so I'm trying to think about what's going on here, because God does everything for a purpose, right? So what's going on here is that God is not calling Jonah to go do something that doesn't matter. He's calling Jonah to go do something for a very specific purpose. So that tells me this, that even though the city is so evil, God loves this city, right? That God is desiring someone to rise up and go into that city, because the reality is this: God told Jonah, I want you to leave where you are, and I want you to go to a different place and do a different work for people that I love that are facing judgment. And Jonah, I want you to go do that. And Jonah ran away. And while he was on the boat, a storm came. Everybody is freaking out and scared for their lives. Jonah's asleep, right? He doesn't care. And so that kind of tells me this. So the fact that Jonah was being disobedient towards God, it not only affected him, but who else did it affect? The people on the boat, right? They had nothing to do with Jonah's decision of disobeying God, of running the opposite direction. And so that kind of tells me this: whenever we are disobedient towards God, whenever we're hesitating to do the work that God's calling us to do, it's not just going to affect us, it's going to affect the people around us. And so I want us to really focus on what that means for the people that we get to interact with every single day. So they find out it's Jonah, that it's his fault that the storm is happening. Go down to verse 17. Actually, no, go down to verse 11. So then they said to him, what shall we do to you that the sea may quiet down for us, right? So the storm is taking place, and they figure out it's Jonah's fault. So what do we need to do? For the sea grew more and more tempestuous. And he said to them, pick me up and hurl me into the sea, then the sea will quiet down for you, for I know it is because of me that this great tempest has come upon you. So they find out that it's Jonah's fault of what's going on. And they said, what do we do? And Jonah says, you know what, just pick me up and throw me in the water. All right, I'll take one for the team right now. Now he takes one for the team right after it's already too late, right? Throw me into the water. And they do that, and the storm calms. And then look at verse 17. It's an amazing story that a lot of you kids probably colored when you were little kids. The Lord appointed a great fish to swallow up Jonah, and Jonah was in the belly of the fish for 3 days and 3 nights. So at this point in Jonah's life, I feel like he's physically running away, and I feel like he's spiritually running away as well, right? And he's physically running lost, and he's spiritually lost as well. Any of you ever been lost before? Right? It's one of the most scariest feelings in the world, right? Now it's kind of hard for us to get lost because our phones tell us exactly where to go, right? Every step by step, right? So like I mentioned earlier, we got the opportunity to go to New York City. And if you've ever been in New York, it's one of the most crazy populated places ever. It's really scary. And so my wife and I, we had never been to New York City before, and we thought for the first time going to New York, let's take 25 people with us. That makes sense, right? We'll keep everybody safe and in line. It'll be great, right? It was really difficult. So we went to New York City 2 summers ago, first time ever on a mission trip to go to this place. We took 25 people with us, about 11 students, and everyone else was adults. And there's moments where I was terrified for their lives because I was like, y'all don't get lost, man. Don't go. Just stay with us. And then as we were there, she was so busy hanging out with the girls, and I was so busy hanging out with the guys that we didn't really get to enjoy the trip like with each other, you know what I'm saying? And so as soon as we got home after that week, we kind of looked at each other and said, we have to go back, right? Just us two, no students, no adults, nobody else, just us two, right? And so right away, boom, we bought tickets, and we went back last January. If you ever want to go to New York, go in January. It's extremely cheap because no one goes there because it's really cold. So it's awesome, right? Guaranteed, check the prices, it's awesome. So we went in January, and it was great. And so we kind of felt like, now that we're here, let's just go get lost in the city, right? Let's go experience Manhattan and all that stuff. And so we stayed in Astoria in Queens, the neighborhood I was telling you about. And so we rode the subway into Manhattan about 15 minutes or so, and then we just got lost in Manhattan. Let's go look at stuff. Let's go hang out. Let's go figure out this subway system because it's really confusing, right? If you we don't have a subway system here, obviously. So, and so if you've ever ridden the subway before, maybe in any major city, there's these signs that kind of tell you where to go. And all the subways are labeled by letters and numbers. And if you don't know how to read all that stuff, it's literally like you're reading Chinese. You have no idea what's going on, no idea where you're going. And so it was towards the end of our day already. We already hung out throughout the night, went to dinner, all that good stuff. And now we're trying to figure out how to get back to Queens, how to get back home to where we were staying, right? And so I'm like, I know how to get there, right? I'm a man. I know directions, right? So I was like, hey, I think we're good over here. And so a lot of the subways, you just go downstairs and you get to the subway, right? And so I kind of feel like I understand a sense of direction, right? So we go downstairs and we're waiting for a subway, and I start noticing, like, the subways are going that way. We need to go that way, right? And I was like, so I told someone, like, hey, I think we're on the wrong side. And it's not very easy to get to the other side. Like, I wish there was like a little like just stairway that you can just walk to the other side. But it's like mazes and obstacle courses and all kinds of crazy stuff to get to the other side. It makes zero sense, right? I don't know how to do it. And so I was like, wait here, I'm going to figure it out, right? First thing Summer said, ask someone. First thing I said, I'm good. I'll figure it out, right? Side note, husbands, when your wife says to do something, don't hesitate, just do it, right? And so I tried figuring it out, and after several minutes, I was like, I don't know what to do, right? So I took her advice. I go up the stairs, and I go to the first store that I see, and it was one of those like lids, like cap stores, right? And I took her advice. I went over there. And I said, hey, I'm trying to get back to Queens, to Astoria. Like, how do I do that? And so here's what happened. Colin, come up here real quick. Everyone get up for Colin, road travel. Yeah. He's amazing. So we're pretty cool, right? We're comfortable?
Yeah,
all right, cool.
so.
Just chill right there. So I go up to like the people working, behind the desk, whatever, and I was like, hey, how do I get back to Queens, Astoria? And there was a guy who was like standing there, like trying to buy a hat, or he was just hanging out. He wasn't a worker there. And he kind of looks at me. And then he put his arm around me like this. And I was like, what is this? Summer, run. We're about to get mugged. We're in New York, run, right? And I got real scared. And so like he just did this, and he said, you see that? And he kind of pointed across the street. He's like, you see that spot right there? I was like, yes, sir. Go there. Go nowhere else. Go. You see what I'm, yes, I see. Go there. And I was like, all right, mister, please let me go already. Right? It was weird. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it, man. You're welcome. Calling everybody. And so it was the weirdest thing. He grabbed hold of me and said, I want you to go right there, go nowhere else. And I was just like, all right. You could just point it, man. Like, you never grabbed me. But here's the thing. He realized that I was lost, and he didn't want me to get lost anymore, right? And so he grabbed me and told me exactly where to go. In this moment, Jonah was lost, right? Spiritually running away, physically running away, and God had to grab his attention and say, I don't want you to run that way anymore. I want you to go this way. I want you to go the direction that I want you to go to. And God grabbed a hold of Jonah, grabbed his attention and said, I want you to go this way, right? And Jonah finally said, all right, God, I'm listening to you. And then Jonah hung out in the belly of a fish. Don't ask me how that works. Just believe it. For 3 days, right? He had this 3-day moment with God. And what did he do for 3 days? So there's no Wi-Fi there, so he just hung out with God, right? There's no distractions, Twitter or Instagram or anything. He just hung out with God, right, for 3 days. Hung out with God through prayer, listening to him, right? And I know for me, like moments with God are amazing, aren't they? Like I remember being a student and going to Zephyr, and it was always the weirdest thing because Nick or the youth leaders always say, hey, you got to leave your phone at home. And I'm like, what? Leave my phone at home? What am I going to do for 5 days without my phone, man? Like, come on, bro. And now it's even a bigger deal for students because they have like social media streaks, and if you don't know what that means, don't worry about it. But they freak out. But then once they get there and they start having fun, they start experiencing God, they're like all of a sudden like, I don't even care about my phone anymore, right? Because you get to focus on what God has for you. And so moments with God are amazing. And so I remember experiencing moments with God when I was a teenager. And now as a student pastor, I get to take students to camp and I get to see them experience moments with God. And it's a beautiful thing to see. And usually this is what happens. Usually after moments with God, we're ready to listen to God and we're ready to obey God, right? We're like, all right, God, I'm listening to you. I hear you. I feel you. I'm good. Send me wherever you want me to go. I'll go to Africa. I'll go to China. I'll go to New York. Send me wherever you want me to go. I'm ready to go. I'm listening. And then look what God does in chapter 3, verse 1. So Jonah has a 3-day moment with God. And the word of the Lord came to Jonah the second time. I'm so glad we serve a God of second chances, right? Arise, go to Nineveh, the great city, and call out against it the message that I tell you. So Jonah arose and went to Nineveh according to the word of the Lord. Now Nineveh was an exceedingly great city, 3 days' journey in breadth. And Jonah began to go into the city, going a day's journey, and he called out, Yet 40 days, and Nineveh shall be overthrown. And the people of Nineveh believed God. They called for a fast and put a sackcloth from the greatest of them to the least of them. So let me ask this question. So Jonah chapter 1, verses 1 and 2 and 3. And then, we have Jonah chapter 3, verses 1, 2, and 3 also. Did the mission for Jonah change? No. Same thing, right? It wasn't like Jonah had this moment with God, and all of a sudden now he was like, all right, now that you're listening to me, I'm going to send you to a different place, somewhere that you want to go to, Jonah. No. Hey, Jonah, remember that city I told you about before you were in the belly of a fish? Before the storm? I want you to go to that city. And I want you to go to that city and call out their evil. I want you to go help them change their disbelief to belief. I want you to go call out their evil, because that is a city that I love with people that are facing judgment. And I want you to go there, Jonah. So the mission didn't change for him, right? It was the exact same thing. Jonah goes, and man, Jonah's like an amazing preacher, obviously, because he said one thing: yet 40 days and Nineveh shall be overthrown. The people believed. One sentence, right? It's like, I want to learn how to preach from that guy. One sentence, everybody believed, right? Now we're like 30 minutes, and hopefully someone believes, right? Maybe, we'll see. And so then Jonah gets to experience God in a huge way by seeing people come to know God, because of now no longer hesitating, but now moving forward to what God wanted him to do. And it took God grabbing his attention. And it's the same for us. There's got to be moments where God grabs our attention, and then all of a sudden we start to listen to God, and we start to obey God, and we start going to the places that we don't really want to go to in order that we can see God move in huge ways. And so here's the thing. Jonah was in the belly of a fish for 3 days. He had a 3-day moment with God. And so here's my challenge to you, FPE. I'm just calling it the 3-day moment challenge. Right? Obviously, this church is going through some stuff right now to where now you're going to take some time in prayer and figuring out, who's going to be the next pastor of this church and moving forward and all that good stuff, right? And I love that it's no secret that they're telling you what's going on. I saw a piece of paper of the steps that are going on right now, right? And so the leaders of this church wants everybody to be involved in this process, minimally through prayer. And so what I want everybody of this church to do is simple, a 3-day moment challenge. Right, where for the next 3 days, when you wake up every morning, pray for this church. And when you go to bed every night, you pray for this church. And you ask God what he wants you to do to be a part of this church and the mission that this church is going after as it goes out and reaches this community. Because every single one of you has a role in doing that here at this church. That every single one of us, as believers of Jesus, have a role to go and make disciples, and that's what we're called to do. But the reality is this: maybe we're afraid to do it. Maybe it's not that we're not comfortable, right? But God's saying, hey, I want you to leave the comfortableness that you're a part of, and I want you to go do a different work and go to a different place for people that I love that are facing judgment. And so originally, Jonah said no, right? So now I want to talk about Jesus. I'm going to go to the book of Philippians, chapter 2. Philippians chapter 2, starting in verse 3, says this: do nothing from selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility count others more significant than yourselves. Let each of you look not only to his own interests, but also to the interests of others. And have this mind among yourselves, which is yours in Christ Jesus. And this is where it gets big. Who, though he was in the form of God, did not count equality with God a thing to be grasped, but emptied himself by taking the form of a servant, being born in the likeness of men, and being found in human form. He humbled himself by becoming obedient to the point of death, even death on a cross, right? And so here's what I love about Jesus. So whenever Jonah said no, Jesus said yes. Right? And the moments where Jesus was comfortably living in heaven and he was being adored by angels and he was just like living the high life up in heaven, God told Jesus, hey, I want you to go to a different place. I want you to go to a place that I love. And I want you to go serve a people that I love, a people who are facing judgment. And Jesus said, yes, I'll go. And then Jesus stepped foot into this earth, walked this earth, lived a perfect sinless life. And he was obedient without hesitation to the point of death, even death on a cross. That way, by our faith in Jesus, we can have a relationship with God. So I love that. That Jesus was willing to go to a different place. And so now the question and really the response is what's going to be our response? What's going to be our willingness to do this? And so the band's going to come up and we're going to worship and we're going to sing out to God this morning. And so my question to all of us is what's going to be our response? Because as believers of Jesus, God is calling us to go to a different place, to a group of people that he loves. and to minister to people who are facing judgment. And so for all of us, we all have a next step to take. Whether you've been in church your entire life, whether maybe you're sitting here for the first time visiting, all of us have a next step to take. And so I want to walk through those steps. And so maybe for you, you're hearing about Jesus for the first time. You're hearing about the work of God for the first time. And so maybe for you, it's that initial response to faith in Jesus Christ for the first time. That's the next step for you. My challenge to you is don't hesitate. If you have never placed your faith in Jesus and you want to place your faith in Jesus this morning, don't hesitate. Right? Maybe you've been showing up to church every Sunday for the past couple of weeks and you've been hearing about Jesus and you've been hearing people worship and you're wondering about what all this stuff is even all about. Don't hesitate. Ask questions and allow the leaders of this church to point you in the right direction. They want to grab hold of you and point you in the right direction. Don't hesitate. And maybe for you, your faith is already in Jesus. And yet for you, you've placed your faith in Jesus, but yet you've yet to celebrate with this church through baptism, right? If your faith is in Jesus and you have yet to be baptized, I guarantee this, FBE wants to celebrate with you, and they want to see you make that public declaration of your faith, and so celebrate that. And maybe your next step is to take the next step of obedience in baptism. Don't hesitate. And maybe for you, it's just simply getting out of that comfort zone. That God has been calling you to talk to that person, calling you to talk to that coworker, calling you to talk to that student you've been sitting next to in class every single day, and calling you to kind of get out of your own comfort zone and go to a city that He loves and live on mission for Him. Go to a city that He loves and reach out to people that are facing judgment. Don't hesitate. Because whenever we hesitate, we miss a moment from God. And maybe for you, you've been coming to FBE for a while, and maybe your next step is to rise up and step up and begin serving in this church. Right? There's multiple ministries going on in this church, and maybe for you, you've been wondering, how can I serve this church? How can I be a part of this team? Maybe for you, the next step is to begin serving and helping this church reach this community around us with the gospel. And so my simple question to you is I want to challenge you and ask you to figure out the next step for you. And whenever you know that God is putting in your heart to go after the next step, don't hesitate and just go after it with everything you have. And when you do that, I guarantee you're going to experience God in huge ways, and God desires to use you in huge ways. Let me pray for you guys. Father, we love you. Thank you for this morning. God, thank you for the opportunity to be able to serve you, God, to worship you and to read your word. And God, I thank you for the reality that you sent Jesus to a place that you love. God, to go after a mission for people that you love that are facing judgment, and that you made a way for us out of that judgment through Jesus on the cross. And so, God, we just give this morning over to you, God. We just thank you so much for, God, placing us here. God, I pray that every single one of these people know that they are here for a purpose. So I pray that you would reveal that purpose to them right now, and that you would help each and every one of them figure out what is the next step that they have to go after. Maybe for someone, it's placing their faith in Jesus for the first time. Maybe it's someone just saying they want to be baptized if they've never been baptized. Maybe for someone, it's saying they want to serve and join a ministry team. God, every one of us has a next step, and I just pray that we don't hesitate. God, thank you for the story of Jonah. I know for so many of us, we're like Jonah, that we want to run away from the uncomfortable. And God, I pray that you help us run towards it. I pray that in the moments that you grab our attention, that you would clearly help us see that it is you. So God, I pray that you would lead us and guide us to the places that you want us to go, to the people that you want us to talk to. We'd be sensitive to your spirit. Father, we love you and praise you. Amen. Amen. Let's all stand.